All right, we are in week 5 of our class, and you don't have anything due this week that's written, but you do want to start thinking about the things that are coming up. Kind of nice that this is a nice break right before Thanksgiving. Pretty soon you have a presentation either to the board or the superintendent on why the arts and movement are important in classrooms and why we need to continue using those. Remember, this is a presentation, so you're going to use some kind of presentation material to do it with, either slides or Prezi or anything you want to use, but it's a presentation. And then you've got your brain compatible unit, which is due in week 8. And you're taking all these things that you've been learning about what's good for the brain and how to incorporate those into a unit. You can use a unit you've already developed and include the things that we've been learning in this class. So including movement, including music, including art, including wait time, the things that we've been talking about in this class that make it even more powerful for kids. So we want to make sure that when we're teaching, we get kids to remember. And there's been a lot of research on what kids remember when it has to do with watching TV or what they remember when they're watching commercials, because there's lots of money around that. Maybe not so much in education, but we can take what they've learned from marketing and apply it to what we want them to learn in school. So making it stick in their brain. Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called The Tipping Point, how little things make a big difference. And it's a lot about a lot of things, but one of the things he talks about is the stickiness factor. And it's about how things stick in people's brains and why those things stick, as opposed to other things that you forget in 5 seconds. And they started talking about children's TV and what they watched on TV and what they retained and when and what they didn't retain. So children's TV with Sesame Street was really one of the first big pushes to get kids to learn something from TV. And it was pretty successful. A lot of us remember watching it or having our kids watch it. So one of the things that was really successful about it was they had times when they knew kids would not pay attention. Preschoolers will pay attention for a little bit and then will turn away and do something else. So they knew that there were times when the kids would not pay attention, and they use that with kind of fillers in there. They also had very timed segments. So if you watch, they're usually maybe about a minute or maybe 2 minutes long, but nothing longer than that because the kids can't pay attention that long. Very simplified, and then a mixture of fantasy and reality. We know from small children that they don't know the difference between those two. So increasing that is a little bit of what they don't see every day, so it gets their attention and they pay attention. A lot of research on this, and is pretty successful, but there were some things that kids weren't learning as much as they thought, because they thought this is going to help. We won't even need preschool anymore. Kids can just watch TV, and it didn't do exactly what they wanted it to do. Part of it was because they put in adult humor and wit, and kids weren't paying attention to that at all. There were visual cues that they weren't picking up because they weren't being focused on them, and they weren't learning as effectively as they would with a human being. Now, there's never going to be a better way than to learn with a human being in front of you. But if we're going to put kids for a little bit of time in front of a screen, we want that learning to be an effective use of time. So they took what they learned from Sesame Street and applied it to the next big children's TV show, which was Blue's Clues. Wildly successful, smaller cast, kids got to know each character very well, punctuated, running storyline, and repetitive showings over and over again. Very successful, and when they tested kids on what they learned from the show, they retained things much better. So knowing that these are the things that were important to small children, these are things where if you're dealing with primary kids, might be something you want to include in your classroom, that you're going to repeat things, that you're going to have a punctuated pauses, that you're going to have a running storyline going on with your kids. This same information was then used to develop a lot of our newer shows. If you've ever watched Teletubbies and you're above the age of 5, it's going to seem very, very slow and very repetitive. I mean, they'll show a segment and then they'll show the same segment again. And if you're an adult watching that show, you're like, oh my gosh, why are they showing the show again? But very small children, they need that and they like that. Anybody that's raised a small child and they want to watch the same video over and over and over again knows that they like repetition. Same thing with Dora the Explorer. There are a lot of times where they'll ask Dora a question and then they'll wait and she kind of stands there and blinks her eyes. That's wait time because I know that that's very effective for kids to get them to give an answer and to think through something. And the visual cues and repetition. And I think this one up here is a science guy one. I haven't even seen it. I don't have little kids anymore. But this information we can then apply to our classrooms. So applying that to lessons means that we want to use some of these strategies. And we know that most of our brain focuses on visual information. It's just easier to process than text. And most of what we learn, we forget within a month. It's just gone. So we want to make sure that we get kids the information and in a way that they're going to remember it. That doesn't mean that we don't want to use text, but we might want to introduce it with visuals. So that's, it's not that we don't want to use text because we do. We obviously want them to analyze and get deep into it, but start with the visuals and getting them that information. A good way to get kids interested is to use intrigue and mystery. Great for science because it's always about what's going to happen next. But you can do this with literature. What's going to happen? You could have someone send postcards to your classroom. There was a mystery letter writer, getting kids interested in what's going on and just something different. That's why we like mystery on TV because our mind kind of goes to what's going to happen next. Breaking learning into chunks and short intervals. All learners, even adult learners, get bored very easily. And so we have to pay attention to when people are getting bored and then give them breaks. So it might not even be a break of like, now we're going to do something completely different, but maybe it's, okay, now you're going to write something down, or now you're going to talk to your neighbor about, or now you're going to make an appointment with someone across the room when you make eye contact and get up and move and talk to them about it. But making sure that you're really timing it for what your learners need and appropriate for your age learner. So if you've got very small children, you're going to have it 5-minute timed breaks of when you're going to be doing things. For older kids, what they tell you even with adult learners is 15 minutes is long enough. Then make them do something else because it's just your brain will not process information. You want people to sit and listen for half an hour, they're just not going to do it. Story is the way we have communicated for a long, long time. When we were living, in caves and tents, people told story and we had our oral communication and our oral story. We are kind of programmed to listen to story. And so if we use story to build interest, it's one of the best ways. Many of our greatest communicators have always used stories, and Jesus is the best one. Use parables to teach people the things that he wanted them to learn. So great to use story in your lessons. And emotion. We know that emotion connects us with our kids and builds our relationships, but it also helps them learn because if they're interested in why something happened and how that affected people, we're interested in people. We're just programmed to be interested in people. So if we can get them to that emotional level of why they need to learn something, it's much more powerful. Don't start with the details. I don't know how many times I see teachers start and they're going over the vocabulary or they're going over the really, really minute detail, or they'll break down a math problem and they're just going over procedure instead of building that big picture. So the big picture is much easier to get first and then go down to the details. It's why we tell you to design a unit around essential questions, getting that big idea. Why did people go on westward expansion? Why did they leave Europe to look for a new land? What was the purpose of it? Before you get down to the details of who was the captain of the ship and what was the name of the ship. And a great way to do that is to use concept maps to develop understanding. So there's a great book, When You Have Time, that teaches about learning that sticks or teaching that sticks. And Chip and Dan Heath have written a lot of books. Really great writers, just like Malcolm Gladwell. When you get a chance after your master's degree, you want to read this book. They've got some great ideas. And their 6 principles are these right here. They kind of match some of the other things that I already told you about. Credible means that it makes sense, that it is believable. It's not some kind of outrageous thing. And when they talk about that in the book, they talk about using statistics that make sense to kids or to people, okay? I also like this quote that was from the book. A lot of times, especially with our older kids, we want to get very abstract on them, and we know from brain development and what people can learn that some people never get to the abstract thinking level. So we really, really have to start with concrete and then build to the abstract. If you start at the abstract, some of them are never going to get there. And I love these little tweets that they had from their book. So I thought they were a fun way to end here. So when you are thinking of designing your classroom and making your teaching stick, some of the ways that you can do it are through story and chunking and making sure that kids have the information in a visual way first, building that big picture, and then getting down to, or the concrete, and then getting down to the detail. Okay, so have a great week. If you have any questions or concerns, give me a call or email me. And I'll be at a conference this week, but I'll still have my phone with me, so I am available. Have a great week.